Mr. Alex Salazar. Alex is a police reform expert and activist, drawing from years of his experience as a former U.S. Air Force security police officer, an LAPD officer at the infamous Rampart Division and South Bureau Narcotics. He's currently the owner of the California private investigation firm All American Investigations. He speaks regularly on fear control training, as well as bringing awareness to PTSD, mental health, and racism in law enforcement. He's been featured on MSNBC, E! True Hollywood Story, and documentaries such as Unnecessary Force, C.O.P, Voices of Blue, Black and Blue, and THS Investigates. He has a new book coming out called Chasing Monsters, Breaking the Code of Silence on PTSD and Policing. So welcome to the program, Alex.
I'm very happy to be there. Thank you for that generous welcome there, Randy.
Of course. So I wanted to just kind of dive right back in because, our podcast, the 5-0, is drawn very heavily, while we have kind of a variety of guests, it's drawn very heavily about those of us who have worked in the criminal justice system, especially as police officers, and who are now spending our days speaking out against the inequities of policing and working, to make this more just system, not only for the public, but for the police themselves. So I wanted to start with getting just some context, go back a little bit in time and for you to share with us what drew you to policing. Was this a childhood dream or did you fall into it?
Well, I kind of just fell into it. I went into the Air Force as a security police officer first, not knowing really what I wanted to do with my life. And so I fell into it. And I found that I liked it. I liked serving people. I liked talking to people. That was my big thing. So upon leaving the military, I was fortunate to have been picked up by the LAPD. I went in December 1st, which was a Friday, 1989. I had Saturday and Sunday off. And then on the Monday, December 4th, I started the LAPD Academy. So I kind of didn't have any break. I just went into it. And at the time, it was prior to Rodney King. To give a little bit better context of it, it was 2 years before that major incident. And so I was there at a very unique period, just prior to this whole digital age, the internet, where everything is exposed, everything is shown. So when Rodney King finally hit, it was kind of like things were going to change now.
Sure. And so when you started, you just kind of landed in patrol, was your first assignment?
Yes. I was assigned to the infamous Rampart Division, which was the basis for the movie Training Day, where Denzel won Best Actor. The picture itself won the Academy Award too. And so I went there as I like to characterize myself as very idealistic. I was going to change the world. I was going to help and serve my fellow man, but it turned out to be a rude awakening there.
Well, that was the very thing that Denzel was mocking in the movie, right? Is when Ethan Hawke he's coming out ready to fight crime in the ways that we're taught in the academy, and then you quickly learn that that isn't necessarily the way it rolls. So you're at Rampart. When what was kind of like the earlier indicators that just something was amiss, right? That just things weren't exactly what you thought they were going to be.
Well, I was assigned to one of the toughest divisions, Rampart, 77, Southeast, those areas, including Watts, which was the Southeast area, were known as the cowboy ghetto gunfighter divisions, where supposedly the tough people went. And I wanted to go to Rampart because I was a Spanish speaker and I wanted to serve down there. But when I arrived there, my first day of patrol, my training officer said to me, "Salazar, forget everything you learned in the police academy. This is how we do real police work." And so I saw a myriad of things going on. I worked with one training officer who had been involved in 8 killings, 8 shootings where he'd taken lives. And basically watching him, it was like being in the African Serengeti with a hunter, wild game hunter, except here in this very poor district, we were hunting human beings. And with it being a very condensed area with a lot of immigrants, it was very easy to just blend in and to abuse people if that was what was the opportunity there for many of these people. And so that's where I was at, watching some of these, human beings being attacked by what I would later deem as being sociopathic officers like myself, who would soon cross a line and pretty much just forget everything that we were supposed to do, and that is to protect and to serve the people, not to beat and attack.
Hey, it's Tom here. I just had a quick question. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in LA? Were you from there? Or?
I grew up in the inner city. I was born in Los Angeles, but I grew up kind of like in the suburbs in a little town called Azusa. And so there really wasn't too much going on. There was just a very quiet burb. And so the things that we heard about happening in LA were things that, they were kind of far off for a teenager like me, that I didn't know anything. I didn't know about gangs. I didn't know about that world, that culture, the subculture that I would soon be entering, in a few years as I was growing up. And so, being Hispanic and Latino, Mexican American, it was a very unique time period, for me to see this new evolution that would soon take place during which would later become like I said, the Rodney King beating, and then working our way up to which would become known as the Rampart scandal.
Well, one of the things that that you said that it always strikes me. I've spoken to hundreds of police officers over the years. Tom, I'm sure you're all three of us really have. I have never heard anyone give a different story other than their first day of field training was forget everything you just learned at the academy, right? I mean,
that's exactly what happened.
I've literally never met a single soul. And it's funny that you mentioned Training Day, because my partner, Ivy, she had not seen it. And so we literally just watched this in the last couple of weeks. And that's a line in the movie is very early on. He tells Ethan Hawke, forget whatever you learned. And, our approach looking at training, this is an enormous issue is that
I think Randy, I was actually told that at the academy. I think I had a instructor at the academy who said, now when you get out on the street and you get to your FTO squad, you need to forget a lot of the stuff you're learning here because it's going to be completely different. Like, I think it was, I already knew that before I left, which was crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. So Alex, you mentioned that, like crossing over, so to speak. And I think most of us have, honestly, because it's a very insidious system that when you get in, the end justifies the means, right? Is that, we're out fighting for the good guys. How long did it take? Did you see yourself kind of sliding in that direction?
Well, I did actually. My second year on the job, it was 1991. I barely had 2 years, on the job. And basically, I had an incident while off duty in downtown Los Angeles, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I was supposed to go to a wedding back then it was in the afternoon, and I was in Los Angeles to buy a brand new suit to attend my then wife's best friend's wedding. And I look over to my right as I'm driving southbound on Broadway, and I see a robbery going on. This young Latino's attacking this female, trying to rip her gold chain off her neck. She has a little girl right next to her. And so I'm thinking, oh, shoot, and then I get involved. I speed past the guy. I get out of the vehicle. I snatch him up. I grab him. Nothing, difficult at first that I wasn't used to handling. But then 6 guys came out, and they began threatening to attack me, to beat me, let him go. And, and they were just saying all kinds of things, jeering at me, making fun. Eventually, I did let go of this suspect that had robbed this woman. And so as I began chasing after him, I heard the sound of breaking glass. These guys were now breaking the car windows of my brand new car. And that's when I turned back around. I went after them, and that we began fighting, 6 of them against me in the middle of the street. And so as we're brawling, and I have my PR-24, I'm just kind of just deflecting and hitting them with it. They were getting the best of me, 6 guys against 1. And so it was that point I chucked the baton. I brought my 2-inch revolver out, my snub nose. Those were pretty popular back then. And I pointed, I said, I'm going to shoot you. The way I'm saying in Spanish too, giving those commands. And it was at that moment everything just started slowing down. It was like some kind of shock, out of body feeling. I don't know how to describe it. And it was then shortly thereafter that I was hit by a passing car, broke my right ankle. I went flying over the hood, and there I am looking in horror at my ankle as I'm just lying there on the ground, and it's just kind of like wiggling back and forth. I can't get up. It's obviously it's broken. These guys are now ransacking my car. They stole my badge. They stole my gun. They stole my police uniforms. They basically raped me mentally of my belongings, and just me lying there watching them helplessly, just thinking to myself, how the hell did I get here? Because minutes later, I was just driving home normal and not thinking anything. But as for me, I always thought, this could be my wife, it could be my mom, it could be one of my sisters, a relative, and no one was doing anything that day when I got involved. So, and plus I was a police officer. And so it was my duty to go out there and help. And I went there, and I just never knew or anticipated what would happen at this incident, that the department glorified me, because Daryl Gates would then say, see, we don't, beat everybody, they would use my not shooting these guys to justify the 4 officers who had beaten Rodney King. See, we don't kill everybody. This guy didn't do it. And so, but for me, I was ostracized afterwards, because, for me, in my mind, I did not feel I got to shoot these guys. No one had a weapon. Yeah, they were kicking my ass, but that's not what I felt at that particular moment. At that time, I had to execute these guys, because I very well could have, and then they were telling me, shoot me. And I was still thinking, okay, nah, it's not going to be a good shooting. In my mind, that's what I'm thinking, guys who are kicking my ass, and, other than them taking my weapon from me, I didn't feel that fear yet. But that would soon change, of course. When I came back to the department a few months later, my partners were telling me, why didn't you shoot the MF, or why didn't you kill him? Why did you get involved? Was the big question. That, we don't have backup. That you're not carrying your 9. You don't have your radio. I mean, that was one of the things that they always talked to us about in the academy, and was getting involved. But this was an obvious strong arm robbery. The woman was being attacked, and I made that conscious decision at that moment to help her out. But again, as I said, the ramifications of that particular decision would continue to this very day here today, where I'm still somewhat affected by what I went through.
Yeah, and I think that in these kinds of circumstances, I mean, is that had you not done something, had you not intervened, and either saw something turn far worse, or later on the news, then that also is going to be something that's going to end up on your on your conscience for the rest of your life as well. So kind of in those situations, you're kind of a damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Had you ever been assaulted before? Was that the first time you'd ever had your ass kicked, or had you had it done?
High school. I got involved again for a friend who was getting bullied by some bullies. I got involved, and I got my ass kicked there. But I've always been somebody that I try to help out whenever I see things happen. I guess it's been kind of my little pattern in life, my trends supposedly here, to try to help out when you see something going on, rather than, well, it's not my problem, I'm not on duty, and what have you. So for me, it was something, well, I got to do something. I have to help out this lady here that was there. And as human beings, I feel that is our duty to help out one another, even if we don't know them. That's the reason why we became police officers. So for me that day, doing that was just simply, helping out another person that was in trouble.
I'm just curious, like how, because it sounds like you were able to think pretty clearly while if you're sort of on the losing end of things, but you're thinking through, well, I'm not there yet. I was wondering if there was any sort of thing that you can point to that you think allowed you to have to be able to restrain yourself and not freak out and just start cranking off rounds. What do you think it was?
Well, I had ingrained into my mind the acronym IDLE, which was in the academy, Immediate Defense of Life. Okay. Yes, this was my immediate defense. but I still didn't feel that they had gotten the best of me yet. I was hoping at some point, they're going to run away. They're going to walk away. The cavalry's going to arrive in time. I'll get some backup. Someone's going to show up. And that's what I had in my mind, because to me, I look back even now in retrospect, I don't think I would have felt good about that shooting, rather than just, fuck these guys. I'm going to shoot them, and let's do a prayer here. Better be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6. Right. And so, for me, I didn't feel it then. When I look back at it now, I still don't think it would have been a good shooting in my heart, in my mind. But in the aftermath of things, when I was experiencing now what I know to be PTSD, I would say, hell yeah, I'm going to execute these guys now. That would have been what I would have looked at now, because that perspective, that fear was already ingrained into my mind. Okay. I did not know just how bad I was traumatized by that incident, because the whole deal was to cover up what I was feeling at that time. And that's when the problems began, going into drinking and womanizing and just the whole plethora of problems that happen within law enforcement when you experience these things. And it's a way of life. It's a subculture. A lot of people don't understand it. But that's precisely what I fell into in that little dark abyss.
Well, and I want to talk a bit about your PTSD, and we've talked here. Tom was involved in a fatal deadly use of force case as well. I think that the overwhelmingly most officers are walking around at some degree of PTSD, whether they've been in those circumstances or not. But I want to go back just for a second back to your incident, because one of the things that over the last 30 years that I've seen is that, when I was taught in my early years in the academy, deadly use of force was not intended because you were getting your ass kicked. Right. That was a risk for the job, is that sometimes you're going to be banged up and bruised. I have tore ACL. I have a broken hand, a fractured cheekbone. Those were all things that happened, some of which is still fucking with me today. Right. And that's just, that's the outside stuff. But now it seems that, deadly use of force has been extended to the point of, well, if I'm going to get hurt at all, especially, relative to a fight, then now, I can use a deadly, use of force. Do you see it the same way, or am I, being maybe a little hypercritical?
No, I think you're right on the money there. That you're saying exactly how it is.
Yeah. So after you left that circumstance, and you were at Rampart then at that time, or were you in narcotics?
No, I was now at Wilshire Division.
Wilshire.
No, I was at Wilshire Division. Yeah, I was at Wilshire, and it was there. That was probably the most scariest event ever, watching the riots take place. Full-blown riots, the largest ever in human history, my understanding. Over 54 dead, and me being in what I recall as being a modern day version of hell, with all the fires and bodies and just my PTSD being even more inflamed, because just remember 6 months later I had gotten my ass kicked, and now I was in the full-blown riots, watching the city of Los Angeles burn down. And Wilshire was one of the divisions most heavily hit, along Crenshaw and all those major streets right there that lead to South Central.
Were you answering call? You were answering calls, and
what we were doing is there was no answering calls really there those days, because everything was a help call. There were shootings going on all over the city. We were under attack by automatic weapon fire directly across the street from the police station. Uzis, submachine guns, AK-47s, all kinds of things, were being leveled at us. And here we were chasing looters. I remember one chase that we had. There was 4 of us in the car with the helmets on, and And we're just, all day long, with the sirens. And here we are chasing this one group of looters. It's now nighttime and they just got a whole bunch of stuff. And then they take us down this unknown path where they just make this turn and disappear. And then we run smack into this chain, this chain that was there as a barrier. And when we hit that chain at about 40 miles an hour, it just whipped back. It broke. Okay, this big thick ass chain, and then came back and then just whipped the front windshield, coming close to just slicing off those officers' necks that were sitting in the front. I was sitting in the back. And as it broke the front windshield, right, we kind of stayed quiet. It was like about 2-3 seconds. And then we all just burst out laughing like hyenas, uncontrollable for about 10 minutes. And it was like the most bizarre thing, us laughing crazy during the middle of a riot. This chase that we had. And it's something that just never remains just there. It's always present here still.
And how does that manifest itself? Is it something like you see little movies in your head, or is it?
I'm very hyper vigilant still from everything. I'm sure you guys are too, just from being involved in shootings, Tom, and killing people. You're never the same. And we tend to minimize that human factor. Oh no, you'll get over it. You're tough. You did it for a good reason. You were, but gone is the human factor when you see the dead person in their eyes or they're gurgling and you can hear the blood in their lungs. And I mean, those things are terrible to see, and they're forever etched into your mind. You will never forget what happened. Just like I will never forget that moment with my partners. The chain coming in, me getting ran over. It's like yesterday. They're there. And so I believe that law enforcement as a whole has really minimized what goes on in the mind, okay? Because there's so many suicides, so many domestic violence issues, behavioral issues with law enforcement, guys who are good cops, who now all of a sudden become bad cops because they are just beyond damaged goods. And so the whole thing here has been to keep a lid on it by having internal affairs, which internal affairs works perfectly to handle internal problems. While we got to cover this up because, he was having a bad day today and he's having trouble with the wife and, all these things that are used to justify to protect the officer that has now become something that's totally exposed. So it was that environment, like I said, that I functioned in for many years. I started a damn riot one time. I started a riot because I was having a bad day and something like 50 people got involved. We were buying narcotics in the projects and some gangbanger came and hit the side of the car really strong and set me off. It was kind of like the Tasmanian devil. I was just sitting there relaxed, thinking about something while my partner was doing the drug deal on the passenger side, and this gangbanger said, "Get the fuck out of here," I said, and then that's when it set me off, the Tasmanian devil. I came out with my Yazoo radio. I said, "You want a piece of me, MFer?" And bam, I whacked him over the head. Next thing I knew, everybody started coming out of the projects, and we're fighting. All the undercover officers are responding, and then the backup officers, the units that were surrounding the perimeter, listening in on the wire, responded. And one of the officers, I remember, had left his vehicle parked on the street just as you come to the turn and had gotten out to help out with the fight. And so here was one of my other partners that came around the corner really quick, one of the raid guys. And out he comes, Don, and he's just like shaking because he had hit the car that was parked right around the corner. The car had flowed, and that was when I had stopped. Everybody just kind of stopped the fight for 1 second to watch this car, fly like 100 feet, skid away. And I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? It was that moment, I was like, I lost control. And so, I mean, these things happen daily where these officers lose control and they're allowed to get away with these issues as I did once upon a time. And so I think it's great that you guys are looking beyond, that these guys are bad cops, because there's more to the picture here than what meets the eye, here today in modern day policing.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. You mentioned just every day, the things that people encounter. Sometimes it's the unusual things you encounter. Like, it's not the things you would expect to stick in your mind. It can be these, like, for example, one of them was me it didn't even involve me. It was one of my my partner that I was working with on his way to work it was an accident, a traffic collision, and there was a kid, and he got out and gave CPR to the kid, and it didn't help. The kid died, and he was on his way to work, and when he got there, he didn't get sent home. He worked his shift, and even though I wasn't there, just being connected to that has a weird impact on you. So it's not always the things that you would expect. It can be weird events, weird things that you encounter too.
Right.
Yeah, and in fact, I've always described it as layers. Right? Is that every day that you go to work, another layer gets stacked on top of the last layer, and
absolutely
right. And then at some point, the weight of those layers, collapse in on itself. It's just not sustainable.
Right.
And Tom, I agree with you. I think just being in the environment, right? Most cops, like if we stand around, we're normally with these folks socially as well as professionally, right? So this is who we're hanging out with when we get off work. And what do cops do? Is they stand around and tell war stories, and some of them are fun, and you laugh about the crazy shit that you saw. I always say that, and I'm the only one among the three of us that didn't go in the military, but I always liken policing like the military. Like, you see things that no one else in the world really sees on a day-to-day basis, and that's really cool on some levels, right? But it's also very taxing, and so. Like for me, it's like it was just kind of like what I've heard other people call, like, or what they say in war is like mission creep, of where this just slowly, just layer after layer after layer, it ends up at a point where you start seeing where it's fucking with your head. And for me and Alex, we talked about this about racism, right? Is that when your focus is dealing, constantly over policing Black and brown neighborhoods, especially Black neighborhoods, you're locking the same folks up over and over and over, then, these two become layers. And to justify your own actions, then you just point back and say, well, it isn't me, right? I'm not a racist cop. I'm not doing racist shit. It's them, right? It's their community. It's their problems. I want to make sure that we continue about PTSD, and I wanted to get your viewpoint. And Tom, I don't know if you and I have talked much about this either. Is that one of the issues about mental health and policing is understanding the great deal of liability that surrounds it. And I think this becomes, hypermasculinity is one issue, right? Is, I'm a tough cop. I don't want to talk about my problems. But the other part of it is that if I'm an officer and I go to, my commander and say, look, I ain't feeling right in the head, right? Things aren't going well. Then there's almost a punitive response, right? As, they're going to restrict my duties, or, I might get my firearm taken away from me. And so it becomes
the rubber gun squad is what we
right.
call it. Take away your gun. That's what really happens.
Yeah, and so, but how do we get around this? I mean, because that's a part of the, and then you're ostracized, or in fact, I've never heard that term. I think it's hilarious, but I could also, like, if I was the one who was having to go see the captain, I don't want to be the mother-fucker who's now in the rubber gun squad, right? I mean, that's going to be a huge hit to my ego.
Most of the times, an officer, that says, I tells the shrink, I want to kick the cat, I want to beat my wife. A lot of times they just want to vent. Okay. Right. And that's what they don't get to do. They don't get to vent. They have to remain in that mindset. Okay, I'm an officer. I have to behave perfect. I can't do anything. But as you mentioned so brilliantly, it's all about these layers. Okay. And I mean, you're talking about massive layers of trauma that I believe have not really been looked at the way that they should be. I mean, it's amazing that you're talking about it because it's perfectly said. These layers here accumulate after, imagine years, 30 years of layers, okay? And, you know, working in a place like Rampart or 77th, where they're getting shot at, maybe they lose a partner, they see, you know, all these bullet riddled, mashed up, ran over, decapitated bodies from accidents. You know, you're not going to be normal. You cannot be a sane officer having a good perspective at the time of a shooting if you got all these things going in your mind. And so, yeah, you're going to overreact in many cases because of fear. And so that's why the fear management is so important with what you're talking about, Randy, Tom, you know, and especially Tom, you being able to talk publicly about how you felt about that shooting. I read your article, by the way, and it's just brilliant. I loved it. And you, Randy, coming out and writing that bestseller viral, you know, article, you know, I was a racist cop. These are the things we need to identify within ourselves. That is the problem there, that we haven't been able to come out, you know, as our gay brothers and sisters did, you know, us police officers who want to have reform. It's almost virtually impossible because law enforcement, you know, says, well, no, you don't have any problems. You're fine. And they'll say this because it's a liability issue. They don't want to have Officer Friendly, who's been there in all these gunfights, who's a ticking time bomb, who all it takes is a Sandra Bland moment, you know. Oh, you know, we got a fucking troublemaker here. Come here, you know, pull you out of the wing, and you know, a situation that never should have escalated, like me starting that riot, okay, then occurs. And so these police officers are just like kind of like, oh my God, what did I do? As we saw with the person, the officer on George Floyd's neck, you know, he's just there with his knee, just totally oblivious, not thinking of anything, and just kind of lost in the moment. Okay. And that's what happens. They go into these lost in the moment type things where they're now responding to the terrible training that they've had. Okay. Because the training does say, you know, in your mind, well, if you believe you're going to be killed or whatever, then you have the right to kill him. Now, that's often skewed by all these layers that we just, you know, went over. And how are you supposed to respond when, you know, afterwards, you know, you're doing what you were trained to do, and now you're labeled a murderer? Okay, so the problem is not so much these police officers, as we can see that there's a pattern of behavior here. You take any good altruistic person and they're going to become an asshole. They're going to become a killer. So it's really important that we go after these type of faulty ways of thinking. I mean, we have all this technology. Look at us. We're here on Zoom and cell phones and computers in the car, all these things. But yet when it comes to the human disciplines and humanity, we're still in the caveman ages, you know, with you know, having to beat people, and instead of talking and having that type of you know, relationship with the homeless, with the mentally ill, which make up, I would say, you know, 75% of the people that we're dealing with out there anyhow. And so for officers to come out like they did out here in Fullerton, there was one officer out there who got into it with a homeless man, killed him, pulverized him to death. He said, you know, these fists are about to F you up. And why is he talking like that to a homeless person? Okay. I mean, the poorest of the poor, the sickest of the sick, you know, he's out there messing with them. But why is he out there messing with them? Because he's also sick. Okay. And so we become part of this crazy whack environment where you have mentally ill policing the mentally ill. And so for me, you know, it's something that we need to do is talk about it more. And the more that we talk about it, the less stigma that there is, I believe.
Stigma. I've been shocked through this whole experience to this past year to see people who, some of whom they study professionally, they study like issues. Like I know I had one friend who part of the focus of his research is on the issues related to gender and masculinity, who I sort of said, well, a lot of times cops are freaking out because they're scared. They don't know what the hell to do. And they just, they freak out. And him basically calling them, he didn't use this word, but he basically called them pussies. He can't get his head around the idea that police officers, just like other groups, they it's easy. It's just easy to blame people and say, well, they're evil monsters, and not think, well, what has this person's path been that makes them behave that way? There's a story behind it. There are all these layers that we talked about, but it's just much easier as a society to just stigmatize and say, well, it's because they're evil sons of bitches, ACAB, all cops are bastards. Well, maybe to a certain degree, I would agree that all cops, because you have to be a little bit of a bastard if you are working that job, doing what you're doing day after day, dealing with what you're dealing with. I think it's probably pretty reasonable to expect that an average person is going to become a bit of a bastard after a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was a progression for me. But right when I had that incident in 91, like I said, with only 2 years on the job, I was instantly transformed. My high school sweetheart, who had been with me through high school, through the Air Force, the military, and now my second year, we were divorced within 2 years. Okay. I mean, it was really bad because it was a night day change where I started drinking almost immediately and just having these nightmares and then all this dysfunctional behavior.
Was it a shame? Just to get kind of context of how this started developing, that push to drinking and relationship problems. I mean, what was it overwhelming that you walked away from that you think that really kind of made that pivot?
Well, I think it was my partner's ostracizing me. Why didn't you shoot him? Why didn't you shoot him? Why didn't you kill him? What I mean, that was the big thing here that kept on playing over my mind. To kill, to hurt, and so that's exactly what happened. I became a terror, and began to immediately racially profile, use excessive force, just by looking at someone all crazy and twisted. I had this very demented outlook, okay, that many officers develop, and that many, as we're speaking right now, they'll get upset as we're hearing that there's a bunch of bullshit, how some of them are. But hopefully there's some that are like, oh man, this can happen to me, and they'll take this information as it being real, because I'm not the only one talking about this. You guys have been talking about this for a long time. Frank Serpico has been talking about this for the ages. Okay. And they've disregarded this poor man's advice for change, for the PTSD, for all these things that cause this dysfunctional behavior that we've known for the ages that goes on within law enforcement. And so for me, I get accused sometimes by police officers, oh, he's anti-cop, he's a disgruntled person. No, for me, it's none of that. For me, what it is they ruined my life. They've ruined so many lives. The system has killed countless more cops than what we'll ever know who've committed suicide. Okay. And it's also killed untold victims here, because you got all these mentally ill officers out there killing people. Okay. It's that simple. It's nothing that is rocket science. I mean, it's great that you're doing finally the research to prove, to show that this is exactly the problem. Okay. And that, this sweeping of things under the rug, it can't be controlled like that anymore. Law enforcement needs to accept responsibility and to be able to say, you know what, we're wrong. This arrogance behavior, no, we're wrong, right, and you're wrong. And, this crap that they come out with, well, this currently is under investigation. It's maintain the integrity of the investigation crap. That's usually what they come out with, to deal with, an egregious killing that's been caught on tape while it's under investigation. What other entity gets to do that, where they get to investigate themselves and come up with an analysis 1 or 2 years later down the road? Okay. So it's a bunch of BS. It needs to change. And it's so nice to be on here with like-minded individuals, and hopefully, there's federal, state, local cops that are listening to this, that aren't brainwashed. Okay. Because that's really a lot of the problem here, is that they've been trained wrong. Okay. There's some really bad training out there. And those that, are always saying, oh, I back the blue, I'm for the blue. There's nothing wrong with being there for your fellow officers, but turning it into a cult, a brainwashing mechanism where, I bleed blue, I got my partner's back. Well, they're not going to have your back when you go down, you dumbass. And we see that happening time and time and again. You see these officers who have done dumb shit. They're caught on camera, and no one comes to their aid. You don't see no one say, hey, I got your back, my brother. No, you see everybody, oh shit, what the hell? I'm getting the hell out of here disassociating from you. I have seen that happen so often, time and again. This officer or a whistleblower cop becomes a leper. Okay, all because they're exposing things, or maybe they're having problems and issues, and they don't know how to deal with this because of the shame associated with the command staff. Here at LAPD, we just had an article that came out where this whistleblower came out to talk about the toxicity going on in the bomb squad. This is an elite unit supposedly, right? And we got one of the assistant chiefs, reacting because, strongly, very harshly against the complaining officer because, blew the whistle on what was going on. I mean, and they really try hard to contain all the dysfunctionality because they cannot show, don't you know, for a second, what the hell's going on over here with the police? No, they have to react very heavy-handed because control is the name of the game.
Well, one of the things that you're absolutely right, and the ridiculousness of how they control the narrative. I think that the age of the internet and technology has allowed to kind of pull back the curtain for people to really see just how full of shit they are. When we had this case with out here with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department who shot a guy in Gardena, a security officer. This happened, right around the George Floyd killing, and our sheriff. Our sheriff, quickly wants to, seal records, including the coroner's report, and because they've been allowed to do this for so long. And we had a medical examiner who was like, nope, that we're not going to do that, and release the records. Now has started an independent inquest. One of the things also that I want to mention that you said is that. Because I think that one of the unhealthy things in the advocacy side of this is because I do think that this is important that, especially those of us who have had these shared experiences, to be talking about it, to be informing the public, to be reaching out to the officers who are still there. But one of the things that I think is a problem in the advocacy arena is this individualization, right, of cops when there's wrongdoing or excessive force, or is that I think that's oversimplifying things. It's not just about this one guy, right? It's not just about yes, we have cases like Derek Chauvin who killed George Floyd. That's different. I don't think that there's a lot of those kinds of guys. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that there's a lot of those guys that represent, what's happening with like deadly use of force cases. But there's a lot of problems, and I feel like that sometimes like advocates just jump on the individual instead of like we've got to take a step back, right? I've long said that the most powerful word or the most powerful question in the world is why, and if we start asking why, right, it gets us in trouble. But when we start asking why, then we start looking at, why are they trained this way? Why, why are there cover-ups? Those kinds of things. So I think awareness, giving an opportunity for officers to talk about it, to humanizing these guys, even when they fuck up, I think is really important. But what's the other way out of this? How do we make this transformation from what has been going on for centuries now?
Well, it's all a complete rewiring of the system. I was born here in the United States. I served my country in Central America. Saw a lot of crazy stuff that we do in the name of liberty, and also as a police officer. So I feel that I have the authority to be able to talk about these things, having been there. Okay, and so what we need to do is we need to have a cleansing of the mind, an atonement, of an acknowledgement, that there is a really bad racist history when you look at things and the way that the history was taught in our schools and just things like that that's what's going to remove finally, I believe, a lot of the prejudice and evil thoughts that are there, because my Mexican brown ass Squanto looking, type, I became a racist. Okay, how is that possible? And so, it's possible when there's that kind of environment where you're looking down at people. And I had a couple partners that we went one time into a house to go search a home, and there was all these illegal immigrants undocumented inside, and there was dirty floor, there was cockroaches, refried beans, and then as we're searching the house with the gun, we come across about 30, 40 undocumented, and he's like, "Look at these dirty Mexicans." I'm like, "Hey, well, I'm not talking about you." That's what he said. Another time, I was working with another partner. This was a training officer lesson training. And he says, "Salazar, you need to learn how to write tickets." And then he looks at me, and then he points at a car. "Look at these wetbacks. I bet you they don't have a driver's license." So there we go to go arrest. To go cite the vehicle, and it's a man with his wife and 2-3 kids, and just totally demoralized the man, made him feel bad. And yes, he didn't have no driver's license, but it was all very racist, when he came out and said, this guy does not have a license. Okay. Removing all the human aspect of it, that, maybe he's working hard, he has kids, and at that same time, that's when I came to realize, oh, that's why they call us pigs. Okay. And I was just kind of thinking that to myself, that this is pretty bad, but it's something that it takes time to recognize, as you did, in your groundbreaking viral story. I was a racist cop. You're not going to get too many officers that are going to say that, okay? Or someone that criticizes or scrutinizes or shooting, or even somebody like me that's been talking about this for the longest. It takes a while for it to really be accepted, because we've come full circle here now. We know who we are. We know what we've done. And you have to be able to say this, because otherwise it stays normal. Okay, and that's been the problem. All this behavior has remained normal, even though they brought all these different Christopher Commission, the Knapp Commission, all these various inquests to find out, well, what happened here? Well, everybody knows what happened, okay? And nothing ever changes. And nothing ever changes because it's the same insular culture of shut up, don't say anything, stay quiet, don't say this. It's all controlled. And that is exactly the problem, why we're not able to change. And so once we can make it, and you already said it here, Randy, we have to have that environment where the officer can speak up and say what they're feeling. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go out and do something bad. They're talking about it. An officer that is really on the edge will probably be relieved of duty, should be relieved of duty, be sent on a vacation to Hawaii, to some self-help group talking about PTSD or something like that, getting it out of their system. And if they can't do the job anymore, then they need to be pensioned off. Okay, something needs to happen where they're given some sort of little pension or monetary settlement, rather than paying out these $5-10 million awards for murdering people. Okay, because they knew I was damaged goods, because I had a jacket up until the time that I left, because I started beating people and people were reporting me. In fact, at one point in time, I had to have the SWAT team on my house because there was death threats on the street, regarding this crazed ass cop, that was out there attacking people. I was that person. Okay. So, and of course it was all covered up. So we need to deal with this on the forefront.
So what you're basically saying is we need people from behind the blue line to be speaking about it more openly. And I think we can all understand that there's a cost to that. So for you, there must have been, when you were not speaking publicly, you probably thought there would be a cost if you did. And now you're speaking publicly. What was it that made you say it's worth taking the risk? It's worth the cost of speaking publicly. What was that for you?
Well, initially I was scared. I was getting death threats and just, the negativity that goes with breaking the code of silence, especially when I began saying, you know what, I was doing this stuff too, which was pretty unusual when I began talking about it, implicating myself. Although I was never arrested or investigated for any of that, I was in the loop. I knew what was going on, just like everybody else knew. And so when I began doing private investigations and helping out the victims of police brutality, and in some cases, even getting cases of my own family members, that's when I began to say, wow, we need to talk about this, because it became very plain, especially with the whole internet. That's what opened up my mind, was that in 1999, the computers had just come out. Remember the tower computers? You got mail. And one of the first things I had punched into the computer was police stress. I was stressed out. My stomach was always loose. I had eczema on my arms, all these things that, pointed to massive stress. And as I began to look at, when I found that acronym PTSD, post-traumatic, I was like, what the heck is this? And that's when the light went on. I got really excited. I thought I had found gold. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a reason for why I feel the way that I do. That was the point here where I woke up. I saw the light, and I never looked back after that. That's when I began talking about this, and I felt very empowered, very sure. And then in 1999, that same year, I also came across the book Cop Shock. That's how I came across it. When I punched in police stress, there was Cop Shock, a book written by my friend for many years, Alan Cates, who had researched and studied PTSD and its effect on police officers. So I kind of became a groupie disciple of his to really understand what was going on. And we collaborated on the Police Stress Manual, which is a book that is developed by the Justice Department. And we talked about a new topic that was also there, which was sexual addiction and how the officer is impacted by all this extreme stress that can turn some of them, into some hardcore sex addicts. And I was there, talking about my experiences, crazy stuff that was going on that, no one else talked about, but that I felt, had to be brought out. So, I mean, it's been awesome here with the internet in that respect. I know a lot of people are down on it for just a lot of craziness and bad stuff that goes on there. But there's also been a lot of good that it's exposed so much information. Like for me, it could have come at a perfect time, because I was suicidal. At one point, I wanted to eat my gun too, and I was living constantly day to day with these self-harming issues and still snapping. But once I was able to put a name to the PTSD, I was able to control it. I was like, okay, I'm feeling hypervigilant. I'm feeling nervous because of this. It was no longer I'm just crazy. There's something wrong with me. I was able to now identify that. And so I think with police officers, once they began to see, hey, man, I've been through a lot of bad things. I've been through bad shootings and my behavior in the aftermath of a shooting affected my wife. It affected my kids. I began yelling. I began having all these things. It's great to have this resource here to be able to discuss these things, because most officers will think, what, I'm just a loser. I'm just a bad person. I can't handle this. Okay. To be able to hear this, what we're saying right now, what we're talking about is food for the soul. Okay. Because those that are watching that are feeling, man, I can't take this anymore. I'm involved in the latest scandal. I beat someone, the tape is going to come out. I shot someone. It's just a matter of time. That screws people up in the head.
I know we're running up on time here, but one of the things that I think is important as a perspective is how we normalize the crazy shit that we see from day to day. And it was just the other night with my partner who works in law enforcement. She's a crime analyst, and so she's no stranger to what cops go through or what we'd see day to day. But I was telling her the story about a suicide that I investigated, in the mid '90s when I was down in South Carolina, and it was, a really tragic story, and was despondent because of bills and money, but I was giving her like a bunch of background on the story, and I noticed like I was telling the story just very casually, right? I mean, just like like one would like if any other experience that they had at work, right? It was like, oh, today customers were, whatever, right? It was just very clinical for me. But the look on her face, she's getting tears in her eyes. I mean, you could just see just like how sad she became of me, sharing the story. That for me was just just another story. But after the conversation, we start talking about like that shit leaves a mark. You know, whether it's, you know, keeping me up at night, you know, maybe not, right? But it leaves a mark someplace. So before you go, you had this book, Chasing Monsters, Breaking the Code of Silence on PTSD and Policing. Is it out yet? Or
No, it's not out yet. I'm a perfectionist, so I'm trying to get all the details and all the stories right. You know,
Sure.
I mean, it could have come out at a more perfect time, because this is what I've been talking about for the longest. What you guys are a blessing, man, to be able to help out. I give you tremendous kudos. But yes, it's called Chasing Monsters, and it basically follows my beginning with the LAPD, pre-Rodney King, all the madness of the cases that I encountered while as a police officer, and up to the Rampart scandal, a little bit about the assassinations of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, leading up into my sister's own case where she became a whistleblower herself too, while with the LAPD. And then it goes into my private investigations of me doing civil rights cases with a lot of the attorneys that were involved in the Rampart scandal, and me just going in there and you know, turning from private investigator also into an activist to talk about mainly the code of silence, the subcultures, and to finally get Frank Serpico, you know, some sort of recognition and an apology from the NYPD, from law enforcement as a whole. Okay, they need to say sorry to him. Okay, because law enforcement can never be right until they say sorry to these people. Not, you know, Frank is the symbol. Okay, Paco, as he likes to be called, is the symbol for someone that came in and really saw, you know, powerfully the elephant in the room. Okay, that's there. That what we see is the elephant in the room. And so we really need to stand by these people like you and Tom and so many others that are coming out now right now. You know, we really need to stand behind them. And so my book is precisely about that, about bringing out all these demons and not letting them just stay there, because that's the problem. You know, all this code of silence crap, you know, everybody hiding and people being afraid, and, you know, police killing police officers. Okay, that's what's going on too in some jurisdictions, because, you know, it's a mess. It's a cesspool out there. So my book is going to delve into this, but in a more humane way. And I hope to have it out here by sometime this year, hopefully by June.
Well, let us know when it comes out. We'll definitely share it across our networks and try to get it out there for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Alex is pretty active on Twitter. It's at Alex Salazar. We'll have a link below here as well. So I just want to wrap up and tell you, number one, you know, I agree that we've got to stand with folks, but you included, Alex, and we stand with you as you tell your story, and appreciate you know, the courage that it does take, and the vulnerability, because this isn't always the easiest shit to talk about. And so, you know, we're alongside with you as well. You're welcome to come back anytime. You know, you know, we could have probably talked for another 3 or 4 hours, delve into, you know, Rodney King and Rampart scandal and, you know, and then a lot of just the day-to-day stuff. But but thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if there's anything we can ever do, let me know.
Well, likewise here, Tom and Randy, thank you so much for providing this platform for future whistleblowers and people to come out and talk about this. And you know, if you're a fellow police officer, a former cop that needs to come out and say things, you know, we're here for you guys too. Okay. You know, I've always been, you know, there for officers that want to come out and want to say their truth. And hopefully, you know, they have you. There's so many other platforms out there. Like, and I want to mention really quick before I leave, The Wounded Blue. This is a video. I came out on the side series with my friend Stuart Guy, who was a police officer during the North Hollywood shootout. You talk about PTSD, shot 3 times by AK-47 rounds by you know, these bank robbers, that was televised, you know, for all this time. You know, my best friend was shot in that. So, I mean, that's one of the stories too in the book. But we need to have this platform to be able to speak out. And again, you guys are just amazing. Sorry about that. You guys are just amazing and very progressive and coming out and bringing this out, because this is what breaking the code of silence is all about here, my friends.
And we'll make sure we have a link to Wounded Blue as well. It's funny that you mentioned North Hollywood, because there's not a cop in the United States who hasn't sat through a training to watch that. That shit's traumatic enough just to watch the video of it. So I could only imagine what it'd be to be
right. Well, hopefully, yeah, you can get Stewart on your program too. That is quite a tale. Just like I said, Mario Van Peebles played him on 44 Minutes. It's a movie that's actually for free on, if you just Google it, 44 Minutes, long version. It's right there, and Stewart tells his story the same way, just as I do, very, very open, and how it deeply, it fucked up his life too, if you can only imagine. There were several officers that committed suicide from that day. Okay, so it's real. For those guys that want to be cowboys out there, ghetto gunfighters, they've watched Lethal Weapon, all these different programs. It is not what you think. There's not the happy, what we want to think ending. Many times, it's just disaster and tragedy. That's what we're seeing happening today. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alex. So we really appreciate it. And once again, you're always welcome to come back. And Alex Salazar, follow him on Twitter. Check out some of his work in the links below. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much.